meeting to work.
Yeah,
I'm going to see Nancy Hammerstone for Dave Holcroft. If Dave shows up, Nancy will get bumped out. John, any changes or modifications to the agenda?
just I would suggest moving item 8.1 up to the beginning. Just
Sure.
to receive an application.
Okay, so I'm gonna make a motion to move item 8.1 to the point after item 3 on the agenda, and renumber the rest.
I guess.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Unanimous? Fred?
Yep.
Yeah. Let's see. So let's move into item 8.1. He isn't, I apologize, Fred. Call that I'm not voting. No, forgive me. Thanks. We'll go right into item 8.1 before we do the minutes. Would you like to speak on this? Yeah, applicant here, or John, would you like to?
Yeah, I don't know if Mr. Scarretta is there. Is he?
Yeah.
Okay.
Want to see further?
Nancy's.
You don't see. Third one.
Oh, I apologize. I'm gonna pass over this momentarily. I did say that I was seeing Nancy in 4-day roll call. Okay, yeah, yes, sir.
Hi, how you doing, everybody? So we're back again.
Yes, could you just your name
My
and
name is John Sharetta. I live in 27 Cameo, Willamette. We started our cannoli trailer back in April, which is doing well. And we've put an application now to try to do the same thing in the Landmark building. It's a small 20 by 20 space. But with this place, add some of the dried meats, cured meats, and Italian influenced dried pastas that I wanted to do originally. Just really no space inside the trailer to do that type of operation. So basically, just a service business, not a restaurant. There's really no preparation. It would just be reselling or retailing products through Cento Foods that I have a connection with. Other importers from Brooklyn, New York that have access to all the dried macaronis, pastas, and the cheeses, dried cured meats, prepared, ready to eat products. Again, like a small operation, nothing big, no cooking, literally no preparation. And in this application, the one thing that I put in to do was, like basically I would have to have some plumbing done, but no alterations to the building, no changes on the outside, or inside. I really don't want to leave a footprint on that building. Just plumbing for the wash
we're gonna
station.
get into this in more detail, because we have to set a date for a public hearing to do this.
Okay.
So you're welcome to say whatever you'd like tonight, but we're gonna have to go back through all this and get it in the
Yeah.
public record during the public hearing.
All right, yeah, basically that's it summarized is what we're trying to do and see if we can get approved for that next
Okay,
for going forward in the winter time, basically. I did propose, on here for our trailer, not to be used for service, but for storage, which my landlord approved. The 87 side, basically under that overhang there, to leave the trailer to store in the winter when we're not operating at our first location.
okay,
Come springtime, the trailer comes back out, goes back to 1 Cards Mill Road. So there'll be 2 locations by next spring we're hoping for. Involve more of our family, my son's mothers in food service. Kind of hoping that they could run a shop while we're out doing the seasonal work outside. Well, that's basically it.
thank you.
All right, thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so we need to set a public hearing. Do we have a date suggested for that?
Mr. Chair, I know you have the continuation of the last public hearing that's been continued to August 11th. I suspect this is going to be a relatively quick one and wouldn't want to push him too much further. My sense would be you could piggyback this one on the 11th as well, but you've got 65 days.
Okay, so let's set the public hearing for the 11th. If you could put it on our schedule for prior to the other public hearing.
How about first?
Anticipating that this will be probably less complicated to look into. So I make a motion that we set the public hearing for the special application for August 11th at 7 PM at the Town Hall.
I'll second.
Second. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you,
August
everybody.
11th, we'll see you then.
We'll see you then, thanks you. Nice to meet you.
Okay, so that takes us to the minutes of the July 14th, 2025 meeting. Any corrections? I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, abstentions? Mr. Tabor abstains. Okay. Motion passes. So next up, there is no public hearing this evening, actually. It's noted on our agenda, but it's actually was specifically continued at our last meeting to our August 18th, or August 11th meeting. Under unfinished business, the only item to attend to is item 6.2, is a POCD conservation discussion. John?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if you reviewed our timeline on this, our goal over the next 6 or 7 months at this second meeting of the month is basically to have a discussion, an open discussion led by the commission and stakeholders for each topical area. And the goal will be to gather input at the first of these meetings. And then we will adjourn, and my team will write up a draft chapter based on this input and based on the prior plan. We will have a draft for your review in advance of next meeting. And next meeting, we'll review the old draft and then begin a discussion on the next topic. So this month, the topic is broadly the conservation stuff, natural resources, open space, conservation efforts, including things like Columbia Lake, including Zegda Farm, including Parks and Recreation, including open space, Mono Pond, etc. And so what we did in advance of this meeting is to circulate an invitation to the leaders of the conservation community around Columbia, as well as circulating a little worksheet that broadly discusses asking questions about, and I think I believe everyone got a copy of the worksheet. I just said, what are some of the victories and potential losses over the last 10 years? What are your goals over the next 10 years? What are your hopes? What are your concerns? So there's sort of broad open-ended questions that invited the conservation community to sort of contribute to that. And we got some very, very good pieces of information from the Columbia Lake, LMAC, from Zegda Farm, from some of the leaders, Tom McGrath, Ann Dunnick, and other leaders in the conservation arena. So we have already gotten a tremendous amount, probably 15 pages of really good information thus far that we're going to be spending some time compiling. But we wanted to just have this opportunity to, open it up to the commission and to the stakeholders that have joined us to just talk a little bit about victories over the last 10 years, things that we should be looking for over the next 10, and pretty much leave it open-ended. Again, broad conservation, natural resources, conservation and recreation, farms and forests, open space, agricultural resources, sort of all in the realm of natural resources and conservation. So with that introduction, I'm happy to turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, if you want to solicit input.
In terms of how to proceed, I just want to throw it out to the commission. Do you think we do well to just have each of the stakeholders that have given us such wonderful input give them a chance to stand up and say whatever you'd like to say about what we've submitted and what your perspective is to this point. And then let each of them talk about what they submitted or anything else that they feel to add to this discussion and just absorb it all.
Yes.
Yeah.
So because it's on the top of my sheet, the executive farm management. Well, yeah, I don't know if you were ready for this, but it's just us here, you know, and we really want to hear what you have to say.
That's
And I
awesome. Yeah.
appreciate that you were so timely in responding. We're trying to get this done efficiently, but not without taking everything into account.
Completely understand. Okay, so I am Jenny Glenzak. I am a member of the Executive Farm Management Committee. So what you have in front of you is a lot of information, I'm well aware. And the map in the back is referenced throughout the document, so you can see what's going on at the farm. So over the past 10 years, the farm has significantly grown as far as a cultural and community asset. I feel like best way to put it is that it's kind of like a sleeper property in our town. That there's so much to offer between agricultural and wildlife and also community involvement. It kind of combines everything that Columbia is into one place, which I think is unique and rare in our community. I don't think there's another place that does kind of our three main wonderful strengths together. So we've expanded the community garden over the past 10 years. That's included adding plots and adding fantastic fencing that's something 12 feet tall. And then we currently have 27 of 28 plots used. Almost all of those plots are used by different members of the community. I think there's one or two that are actually used by the same person adjacent to plots, because they really make things. We also have ongoing programs with Saxon Regional Library, which is wonderful. They're fantastic people. I'm sure we all can agree on that. And then we have all of the passive recreation, which are trails and bow hunting, and of course, everyone's favorite, the sledding hill in winter. Yes, you can't forget that. We also are beginning to partner with additional stakeholders. So outside of Deep and the town, we're working with the state and Yukon, and eventually, hopefully fairly soon here, we'll have a contract with a beekeeper to get bees onto the property to help pollinate the garden and really work for our community. There are, of the past 10 years, kind of the major loss has only been the failing solar powered well pump. It just doesn't pump enough water to maintain the water tank, frankly, which prevents our gardeners from watering their crops and can sometimes lead to, especially in hot weather like this, crops drying out and them losing some. We're in the process of working to get hardwiring from the street back to the farm, which is great. And the other thing that's kind of a bigger issue is that Tom here is the only one and only trail maintenance person. So he has a lot to do, and he mows and everything else as well. So intermittently, the trails are inaccessible just due to conditions. And so that is one of the, I think, the larger losses is that we don't allow public access at all times to these trails, mainly because there's just no capacity to maintain them. So in the coming decade, I've just listed it out pretty clearly here for y'all. The big thing is also, of course, the Japanese knotweed, which everyone here will probably hear about for that. And then also really identifying where we can improve the infrastructure for Executive Farm to accommodate gatherings and events and educational programs and a whole bunch of other things that would kind of go in line with that. As far as our goals for the future, I am working on a community orchard proposal to submit for basically a grant that will do trees and bushes such as raspberry and figs and blueberries. One is to create a hedgerow to prevent erosion during heavy rain events that goes into the garden and again causes damage to the garden. But the other one is there is a very large open field adjacent to the community garden parking lot that we have no use for right now. We have 2 apple trees, that is it. They have survived the deer, which is wonderful. But it is prime location for actually putting up a community orchard that the town can use through a public orchard. So that is kind of in the beginning stages of thought process, and as we move down the line, obviously we will keep close the rest of that. So yeah, and it's just increasing educational opportunities, all that good stuff. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's really great. Thank you. You know, I appreciate knowing what's going on because I'm a little detached from what's being experienced there. And Tom, thank you for everything you do in town.
I'm just grateful that Jenny came.
Yeah, it's really joyful to hear the rounding out of the town, if you want, maybe that's the nice way to put it. Thank you. So as we progress forward, we're going to have to refine what you've done and incorporate it into part of our vision going forward. And we'll rely on John to help with that, but just keep track of the progress to make sure the vision that's put into the P O C D reflects what your needs are going forward. In case there's any grants that you want to apply for going forward, we want to plant all the seeds that we can in the P O C D for all of the potential grants that we can have to enhance the property.
I am
Does
very,
everyone agree with that?
Yeah.
I don't want to just, I'm speaking for me right now, but if anyone has anything to add to that from the commission, please do. So we're gonna really want you to review the near finished document in draft form, make sure we're not missing any points that are really important to your interests.
that would be great. If you look at the P O C D, the only point, there is one point in the back where it's who's in charge of what. It is a sub point to a point that Sanctum Farm is currently part of. So it would be great if we actually had more representation in the P O C D.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, because I have it open, I just searched for Zecta Farm.
Page 126.
Yeah, it's really nothing in it, so I think all the work that you guys have put into this, where that intersects with P O C D, the plan would be really important.
Some sort of statement so much to the effect that the successful growth of the Zegda farm. Community farm has had a positive impact on our sense of community and our agricultural roots. And in efforts to expand its reach into the community, are the kind of statements we would potentially want to get into the P O C D. Think about other areas that we could support.
Yeah,
I think there's gonna be a subtext under chapter 10, which is agricultural. Section. So it doesn't get lost, I mean, or it's its own chapter, but I think probably a sub chapter.
Yeah, we're a little informal about this, and it's not a public hearing, so just go with that. It just, you could say your name for the record, though.
Yeah, done. If forty, that are under its own program and under agriculture. If you look at, I haven't seen that, but I've seen yes, the sections.
yeah, this is a chance.
Said farming is not just agriculture. It has open space, wildlife. So it really belongs in several categories. Certainly, the community garden is an important part, but it's more than that. So if you bury it in agriculture, then the open space and wildlife and conservation part of that may get lost. Just as the
I do.
agricultural part got lost when it was something on the open space.
I mean, assuming we're going to have, assuming we're going to have a similar structure to the plan as we had last time. As far as chapters, things like that, we don't have a forest chapter. We have open space, we have recreation, we have agriculture. So, and maybe we do create a new chapter just for this farm, but. And again, my intention was not to bury it in agriculture. As a matter of fact, I said it was a subchapter, and it would be called out as such. So you would highlight it as opposed to bury it.
I think the largest spot that it might be able to go into most appropriately is actually in cultural and community resources or along those lines. Yes, it is agriculture in such that the community garden is crop-based. But there, as far as agriculture goes, it's mainly just hanging on the back two fields that are commercial. And other than that, it is a community space. And it is an open space, not the strict definition, but it is still an open space that provides recreation for the town. So if we were going to put it into one, that would be my recommendation.
So this is what we're looking for from everybody is this kind of input about it being in multiple places and how important, well, we're not gonna, well, it'll be emphasized in each place, so. But we want you to monitor as we create the draft of the document. Certainly, this will give a lot more time. We're gonna have public hearings also. Right now, we're in just information gathering stage. Next up, thank you very much. Next up. Conservation.
I'll let you try it.
But I'll try and enforce this. It's my mouth. Along its neck, not yet on. Conservation is very broad term. And it involves the entire town. Not just places, but the entire town. They ate the water, the soil, and the type of development that is rocking. And that's what we're doing. It also involves recreation, agriculture, everything, the lake. So that's a very, very broad term. And to understand that, you can break it down. For instance, let's start with water. Okay. Everybody needs water. You have to drink it. Everything down from the earthworms to the humans need water. And so that is number one. You have to conserve the water. In this town, we do not have a public water system. Everything is contingent on wells. And the recharge of those wells. So that is crucial in everything you plant. Soil is so important, obviously for agriculture, but also for development. Because you can't build a house on snow. So there's a balance, and you have to be very careful where you put things, where you put the fields for an agriculture. They need very high quality spring. There's also steep slopes, which play a role in the planing. And of course, it all fits together. And so whenever you make a decision on planning and zoning about anything, you must think about the water and the soil. And is it the best use of that water and that soil? And what effect does whatever you're putting, how does that affect? How does agriculture affect the lake? How does housing development affect the groundwater? It's all encompassed. So that's natural resources. And so it's you can break this down. The best way to recharge water for your well is to have all the swamps and streams and lake and ponds surrounded by forest. A high priority wetland is defined as a wetland, a swamp or lake surrounded by at least 200 acres of forest. So how many of forests do we have that are 200 acres? Not a great deal, but we do have some. And the important ones are well defined in your maps in the PZC. The watersheds for ponds, for instance, or the lake, the largest swamp that we have in the state, which is between 66 and Lake Road, is surrounded by almost 500 acres of forest right now. Not all of that is conserved, but about 350 acres is conserved. There's town land also surrounding that spot, but it is not conserved. It has no conservation language.
So are you proposing that we incorporate into our POCD targeting high priority forest conservation areas?
Absolutely, and that's important. Now, this large swamp is also a watershed for the lake. The lake is not necessarily our highest priority water. That conservation values because it's so developed, but it is a huge recreation that is crucial to our town. So we need to protect the lake and its water quality. For that reason, we need to protect the swamp because it's the greatest water recharge. Mountain Comment is another one. That is a well conserved water body. But it's also recreation. So it's all important. So it's So when I get to open space, the open space committee works very hard to conserve what they can in town. We have a checklist, which I have submitted to John. And it prioritizes what's important and what we consider. When we look at a piece of open space, if it's offered and we score it and we look at it, we say, is this important to the town? And how important is it? So we've had a great deal of success in over the years in conserving land. And we've conserved land for recreation. For, as I talked, the water and the forest. And also for agriculture. The Open Space Committee participated with the conservation of Post Hill. There are 3 farms here that are conserved through the Department of Agriculture under various programs where the farmers were reimbursed for their development right, so that those farms will remain working farms and cannot be developed. So that is a school. Another farm that is concerned is Clover City Farm at 448 Route 87. We that was conserved by the landowner. She had access to various grants and programs, but that land is now conserved for agriculture. And so we've done very well, and I think one part of your farm is conserved too. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes, and you did that on your
Yes.
own. Yes, so we're scoring very well in agriculture.
Can I just interject? Maybe we do well to highlight the successes specifically over the past 10 years. So that we can use some examples of what we might want to aim at going forward as a community. So just a few bullet points of the highlights of the last 10 years since the last P O C D, the accomplishments, whether they're Conservation Commission wins or they're just wins within the community that highlight the concept would be probably very beneficial to
Okay,
consider putting in the document for.
see this and you
Yeah.
have this. So there, this is there, so there's the Mount State Farm. We have conserved 700 acres of forest. And there, in the Midbrook section. And we have about 300 more to go. We're hoping to get 300 to complete that project. We have the Anita Faye Graham Marsh, which is the marsh across the street between between cemetery and David Tuttle's property. And the Whitford Village. In that was a donation. The Pekarsky property at 330 Route 66. It's former agricultural place.
Sorry.
And that provides water, a connection to Rec Park, and it is contiguous with the 500 acres. It's not. And we've really
Yeah, so all, so we went to the 700 acres Mono Pond State Park. The property on Route 66. The Ram property over here.
Yeah.
The one of the losses to note was 27-acre parcel on Hunt Road that was sold for development. Positive natural resources. Agri-centered businesses like Hearthstone Winery. The Zegda Farm Community Garden, Zegda Farm Hayfields. Participation in Connecticut DOAG farmland preservation of 3 farms on Post Hill, Cloverleaf Farms we already talked about. Stormwater drainage basins upgrade initiative, which will be good for the lake, other ponds and streams. Recent improvements to the PZC agricultural regulations. The open space set asides for the developments of 10 or more acres. And a year or 2 ago, the farm building tax exemption. And then the awareness of farming's value in the community through the Right to Farm community signs. Concerns for the next decade. We need to have stronger protection for the riparian corridors and wildlife corridors. We need to focus on connectivity and open space. And farmland to protect the wildlife corridors. We need to finish the acquisition of at least 3 more properties out in the Wellswood area. And we need greater protection for all of the watersheds, not just Columbia Lake. And goals. Foster agriculture as an economic driver. Promote businesses that complement our rural character. Active and passive recreation opportunities. Bike shops, restaurants, B&Bs, wedding venues, farm stands, agritourism. Continue the acquisition of key open space parcels. And the big one, complete the Mono Pond Trail Plan. And work with Forest Porter School to promote the education of our children in the areas of natural resource conservation, agriculture, and local history.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Okay. Any thoughts, questions from the commission? Yes, that's very well done.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Of course.
So I maybe this question is for Anne. You had said you would sent along sort of the open space or conservation criteria for preservation or protection. I'm not sure I saw that unless it was wrapped up into something else. Do you sort of have a list of what you look for when preserving?
Yes. Yes, it's our checklist. I didn't include that. I will get it.
Okay, yeah, I don't believe I saw the checklist, so thank you.
And that used to be called a score sheet.
Yes.
Still,
Yeah.
I think that may be what he said.
Score sheet.
Score sheet.
Yes, that's the score sheet as to how to evaluate each property going through a particular
Sure.
sheet that.
Right. So yeah, no, the two documents I got from Anne were the worksheet that we were working on filled out, and then a very lovely, basically overall introduction or sort of preamble to the topic of conservation that I think we can use. Thank you for that, Anne. But yeah, I didn't see a checklist. So yeah, if you could send over the checklist or the score sheet would be awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up. Lake management.
Okay, Columbia Lake Association,
That would be great.
is that okay? Lucky Carter, president of the Columbia Lake Association, and I want to compliment you on the process you go through and the outreach and surveys that you're doing and the collection of information. And I think it's wonderful, so thank you for asking for some input. And Ann's comments are great segue into talking about Columbia Lake, and as Ann pointed out, the value of the lake. I think it's important to everyone who lives in town, mostly for its recreational purposes. It's also beautiful, and if you're sitting on the beach with a rainbow overhead, it's a pretty special spot, but we've been very fortunate, I would say, and I grew up on Columbia Lake. My parents bought our cottage in 1955, so. We've been fortunate indeed that we've had a very benign existence on Columbia Lake up until this point. But I think directionally, we need to pay attention to what's happening. There's two significant threats at this moment, and Mary will get into a little more detail on this, but as I think you all know, if you read any newspapers at all or any news, there's invasive species, aquatic invasive species, hydrilla in particular, is spreading pretty rapidly. There's a variant in the Connecticut River, but there's another form of it in other lakes and water bodies in Connecticut. Is near to us, frankly, is Coventry Lake. One of the Bolton lakes has hydrilla, and the pond on the Hebron border has hydrilla. So as I said in my notes, we're basically one contaminated boat away from having hydrilla in our lake, which would be a spurring really expensive problem to deal with. Fortunately, the town has been thoughtful about this issue. And back in 2017 installed a ramp, a gate at the town beach. And just recently strengthened the ordinance around doing inspections, not only motorized watercraft, but non-motorized watercraft at all. And at our annual meeting later this week, we're going to be explaining to even lake owners like ourselves who have kayaks and other boats that actually never leave Columbia, why we all need to learn how to inspect and do that. To keep our house in order around the lake. So the other thing that's happening, Mary told me once that lakes die, and I'm like, that can't be, like, I just don't accept that, but our lake is aging. And as it ages, it's accumulating phosphorus, and the phosphorus load is getting high enough that we're seeing not invasive plants, but native plants that are growing because of the nutrients in the lake. And we're getting complaints from people that now they've got Class B pondweed in their swim areas, and last week, I don't know how many wheelbarrow fulls that we took out of Eladia, another native plant that when boats go around, they cut it, floats to the surface and floats into shore. So the other problem with high phosphorus load are algae blooms. And we're seeing more of those, and we will reach a point where the phosphorus load gets high enough. That we'll have this cyanobacteria and the lake will not be usable because it won't be safe to be in it. We've already had spot occurrences of that where we've sent out notice saying, don't let your dog swim in the water right now. If you see something that looks like this. Wouldn't be safe for people either, but that could happen more frequently and even get to a point where the entire lake becomes unusable. We end up having to close the lake down. So these are very real threats. As I said in my comments, we've been fortunate on the invasive plant side, and that we don't have a state boat launch. And as you know, and those of us that have been in town for a long time, we've all lived in fear of having to do anything with deep, because having to do anything with deep gives them a potential invitation to come in and get involved and say, oh, you know, we think you should, your boat launch should be available for anybody outside of the town to use, but we've been able to avoid that at this point. So those are concerns for us. I share everything that Ian said about the watershed. So around the lake itself, there's round numbers, 140 some properties, lakefront properties, but in the watershed, there's 632. If my information is correct from the town assessor, that includes the 142, so. Everything that's coming downhill from that watershed is ending up flowing into the lake. That's the whole point of the watershed. So we are quite concerned about what happens in that area because of its potential impact on the lake. So I applaud Ian's comments about taking great care as you look at those acreage and how that might be developed, or not, depending on. All of that conservation there is very, very important. The other, and you may be talking about this, Mary, so I won't say too much, but a substantial source of the phosphorus coming into the lake is through stormwater runoff. So that's a larger issue, right? In a perfect world, this will probably, it certainly wouldn't happen in my lifetime, may never happen. In a perfect world, we would have sewage lines running around the lake and everything that's flowing off of roads and out of people's septic systems would just get piped out. It's probably never in anybody's affordability chart to ever do something like that, but we have to be thoughtful about septic systems, especially those around the lake. As it currently stands, and you guys will correct me if I'm wrong about this, you don't have to upgrade your septic system unless you do something to your property. At least it was that way when we built our house.
That or unless it fails.
Or if it fails, so
That's correct.
there's some very old cottages with some very, I'm not sure what those septic systems actually look like. Frankly, because they're tiny little lots with not a lot of room. And as you know, we all have wells, so that's another issue, so. We've talked about, and this is one of our main goals is to work with Almac to update that 1998 watershed management plan. It had a lot of good, that was a very, very thoughtfully put together document, a lot of very thoughtful recommendations, and we kind of only scratched the surface of some of them. But it did talk about septic systems and requiring pump outs on a regular basis and things that we could be doing that we're not doing now. So I think there's a lot to look at there. I just want to plant the idea with you folks, with this commission, that, you know, there's a lot of work that could be done in that area that would help a lot. So.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions? Thoughts?
Yeah, to get that on that thought. in when a property within watershed, any watershed is developed, if you take into consideration nature-based solutions. For instance, leaf trees, that plays a huge role in absorbing the runoff. Things like that. So if, when you're looking at an application, if you can, if you can encourage nature-based solutions, don't cut every tree. Leave native plants. Things like that, there are many,
Are you familiar with
Inexpensive.
the nutrient allocation analysis that we do?
yes.
Okay. So if you're proposing something that doesn't encompass, more specific that you could be, that would be really helpful if you had any thoughts. And we really, well, we're the container for that document. The originator is LMAC. Now, you know, we're the vessel that implements the work that they do, because we have legislative authority.
But, and that's for any project. If you clear cut the property and plant more, Paul Stahl once told me that, you know, a mowed lawn, not a hay field, but a mowed lawn, is only slightly more absorbent to runoff than asphalt. So the more lawn you have, the more runoff you have. And so, gardens, unmowed portions of lawn, trees, native plants, these kinds of things help without great expense, like drains and sewers, things like that. So the more that is encouraged in any area of town, the longer we can put off the infrastructure that would be so costly. State governments.
Can I just add one thought? Sure. And I doubt this could be done locally, but we sold our home in Massachusetts last year. And in Massachusetts, there's a state law, you can't sell a house without having a septic system inspection showing that you need code. And our house was 4 years old, and we had to do some things to grant into compliance, and lots of other people, same thing, so. It's a great way to get homes that maybe aren't being remodeled or rebuilt, but are being sold to get inspected and bring them up to code. I don't know if anything like that would be possible to locally, short of the state of Connecticut passing a law like that, but it's a very sensible requirement.
Yeah, that would require modifying public health code, but you know, good ideas have to start somewhere.
Thank you.
Sounds like that called Title 19.
Title V.
Title V.
In Connecticut and Massachusetts, yeah. And the cost of it's on, you know, it's the owner's nickel to sell our house. We had to pay to get the inspection and do the upgrades, and the inspection was good for 3 years after you do it. And I think it's very, very smart.
Thank you. So, Mary, are you for LMAC?
Excuse me.
I think
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I think there are mortgage companies that usually require inspections of septic systems.
Almost on mortgage. Yeah, I've never encountered that.
No, not what it affects.
Not this one.
When they do the inspection, if it fails for any number of reasons, then bring, but otherwise. If it passes, it
So
passes.
it's up to the buyer to request the inspection.
Yes.
Yeah, the buyer typically requests an inspection and pays for the cost of the inspection. And if there's a problem, they don't tell their mortgage.
That's not true.
Most of the time.
Septic issues are much more prevalent now than they were 5 to 10 years ago. Correct.
As people are more aware, that's all.
Because there are video inspections that are done now, so. Yeah, the health check on septic system is at a level that didn't exist for generation and half a generation.
The equipment is much better too. It look at this whole septic system.
I know LMAC over the last 5 or 6 years has talked about inspections and pump out schedules for septic systems and things like that. I'm not sure what happened with our discussions, but
I don't think.
maybe it's been relevant.
We have reinitiated discussions with Eastern Highlands.
Right.
We had them at our last meeting, Rob Miller, I believe is the director of Eastern Highlands Health. Because the town has asked us for us to move forward with anything specific to septic systems, we need Eastern Highlands Health to be a part of the solution. And we're not there yet. So we. Hi,
Hi, Mary.
two tough acts to follow. I could just say, Megan did that. Excellent, thank you. I learned everything I know from you, Terrence. Thank you. I am representing LMAC in a draft fashion. We have yet to meet when we have received this email, and Mike Nazo and I have discussed it. But we do want to present this to LMAC on August 6th and come back to the committee and probably shore up what I'm about to share. I will be in some respects repetitive, yet I do want to highlight a couple of victory and potential losses as we move forward. I think, as everyone knows, in the current 2016 planning and conservation and development, we did a strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats, and LMAC was part of that way back when. And certainly one of the strengths of LMAC is Columbia Lake. And we look at it as not only a strength in terms of the environment, the environmental fitness of that lake, but then the outcomes of that are recreational and economic because of the development now that we have around the lake and in our watershed area. So we certainly want to stay focused on Columbia Lake as being a strength of the town of Columbia. I'll mention one threat in that, in our current plan, is overdevelopment, and I'll come back to that threat of overdevelopment. Specific to Columbia Lake and victories, Muffy has mentioned the threat of invasive species, and to the good, very good Columbia Lake, we have conducted 3 plant mappings in the last 3 years. And every plant in Columbia Lake is a plant that is native to Columbia Lake. It's good. There are 10 or 11 species of weeds or seagrass, depending on what you call it, but we're in very good shape relative to invasive species. We did have a hiccup in 2017 when an invasive species that's more prone to wetlands started to go from wetlands literally right on the lake shoreline into the lake bed near Camp Astawama, a couple of beds on woodland, and a large bed in Buell's or Cove, which is over by Lake Road. And that wetlands we felt was part of the species that came into the lake bed. Our then lake consultant said it was not an invasive species. It was specific to the lake. It was specific to wetlands. So technically speaking, he will always say there are no invasive species ever in Columbia Lake. It still was a threat. It grew in Astawama and overtook the cattails. It grew in patches on Woodland Terrace in the lake, and it grew in Buell's Cove as well as on the shoreline. They were very small patches. We worked with the town, we had a public hearing, we used an approved deep herbicide, not Dynamite, which everyone has, if you read the newspapers, is having an issue with, right or wrong. But we did use an approved herbicide. We hand painted each fragment, and I was out there with them. And destroyed that and then removed its root system with volunteers. And that's the only invasive species that we've had in Columbia Lake. And knock on wood, after 2 treatments, we have not seen that come back. And they also treated across the street from Burdoni Road, as well as that wetland areas off the shoreline down in Buell's Cove, which is Bill Foch's property. And the big log cabin, in front of you, familiar with it, he gave us permission and was happy to see the frat monkey still living. So that victory is something that also scared us. And that led to, as Mumpy has also already shared, we need to take measures to prevent invasive species. And we have taken those measures with a gate launch, with a stronger inspection process that was just passed, effective July 15th of this year, with regulations in terms of inspecting for invasive species, as well as some other things related to safety, being a town resident, because this is a lake owned by the town, used by town residents, as examples. So those are the victories. The third victory is something, I don't know if any of you have been on the lake or even perhaps on your own properties. There is a wonderful wildlife, which I always love when they're little ones, called Canada geese. And, you know, when I grew up, or spent 30 years here on the lake, that was great for the goslings. Until one of the mother geese chased Buffy's mother, and it took a chair to separate the two. They have grown in size and quantity as well. And they got to such a point that, unfortunately, we call it goose pate. What they leave on the ground after they eat is full of phosphorus, and it's sometimes in the lake from groundwater runoff, as well as just that they poop in the lake. So we did form with the CLA survey approach and a study group approach. We have an integrated plan that the Board of Selectmen approved in 2023. And the outcome of that have been 2 significant things. We have added eggs and selective reproduction to the best that we can to try to prevent and minimize the number of these. And we have a goose patrol of humane harassment to ask them to nicely fly off the lake when they can fly. We don't bother them if they can't fly. Currently, they're all in the molting stage. They've lost their feathers. They can't fly, and they're teaching their little ones to fly. So those are some of the victories. The geese population last year, we counted over 60. This year, we're at 30. So we do feel with addling and with humane harassment that we are going to minimize that population. It'll take a while. I think Muffy alluded to it. The biggest concern that LMAC has is the input, what's in the sediment on the lake, and the lack of output of phosphorus. The biggest loss that we have now is phosphorus in the lake. Phosphorus is a great product material until it becomes too much. And when you get too much phosphorus, as we have seen in the lake, Muffy says the lake's not supposed to die. Well, it ages. And this lake, since the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, when you look at the phosphorus load that we're looking at, is taking on more and more phosphorus, and we're at the tipping point. What do I mean by a tipping point? Our phosphorus load that we feel we can handle in this lake is 240 kilograms per year. 240 kilograms. Our phosphorus number, we believe, and this is from our analysis of our consultant, lead consultant, is 202 kilograms. If we get to 240, we're looking at significant algae blooms. It's that inflection point where significant change is gonna happen. And likely more and more and more plant growth. The plant growth currently, if I showed you a map, is around about anywhere from 5 feet to 12 feet depth. And guess what? That's where most of the swimming areas, including the town beach, are. And that's where the plant growth is, so it's becoming a bigger and bigger nuisance. Not every dock or property feels that, but we did just remove a fair amount from the town beach and from 6 other properties that pilot the program. We'll still have plenty, we have 30 acres of a plant life. It's 11% of the limit. We get to 25%, we're in trouble. So because of the phosphorus input, and one more number I can give you is typically lakes have a significant amount of phosphorus. And the number that we just captured from last year's sediment literally went and grabbed 5 areas of sediment. Our lake measures twice as much phosphorus in a typical concentration in that sediment and gaining it at 600 to 800 milligrams per kilogram. In other words, we have twice as much phosphorus that is typical in normal lake. Our TRC lake consultant, for the first time ever in December, has recommended before you get to the inflection point, the significant change, you may want to consider neutralizing the phosphorus in the lake. There is a product called alum. That alum binds the phosphorus, it takes it to the bottom of the lake. The phosphorus then cannot be resuspended from sunlight and or from motorboat propulsion, propeller propulsion, where it comes up and starts to form this cyanobacteria in the energy. So we're at that tipping point right now. That's the biggest loss. The second one is a future loss, and that comes back to the threat of overdevelopment. We have a beautiful 100-plus-year-old camp passed along on Columbia Lake. About 120 acres. We believe that it's time, and we've talked about this for at least 2 decades in LMAC probably, because even before I was on LMAC, the Chick Shifrins of the world, et cetera, have said to me, we need the town to start to think about if that property were ever built or were ever sold, what type of developments would be allowed? Or should we ask for right of first refusal? Should there be conservation?
We have asked for right of first refusal, and they will not give it.
The average one?
The trustees of Warburton Chapel own a large part, the Center Church in Hartford owns about 35 acres, and Warburton Chapel owns the rest, and neither will give us a level of right of first refusal.
Might be something we want to revisit and or planning and zoning help support. If we need to maintain the environmental fitness of this lake for recreation and for the economy of this town. Because of the development we have in the property taxes that are being paid. Is it time for us to consider what can be done, if anything, from a conservation point of view, from the planning and zoning? Food for thought. I just want to put a little footnote on that to just plant this idea as well. It might not just be developing the property and putting houses or something like that on it. It's one of the few remaining places on the lake that has a natural boundary against the water. There's no seawalls there, and it's natural erosion. It's natural, it's
Natural
vegetation.
vegetation.
Natural vegetation.
very lightly developed. Look at it.
And almost everywhere else on the lake, as many of us know, and we have done this ourselves. Where the properties have been approved, seawalls have been built. Not in our case, but in some cases they're impervious, and they're mortared walls. And even if they're not, there's still seawalls there. So Anne made this comment several years ago at a CLA annual meeting, and it's stuck with me ever since. And I just want to plant this idea, which is we do not want Columbia Lake to become a swimming pool. And if we put walls all the way around the lake, it will have that effect. And so you were making other points when you made that statement, but one of them is this idea of that you've talked about session waves. So when you get a strong enough wind and you have a space that's enclosed like that, it has a very different effect on erosion. Because you create these like mini tidal waves that. Yes, and motorboats can, that's a whole other topic, but anyway, I wanna leave that thought with you to be thinking not only about. How the land itself might be developed, but the impact that the development might have on the shoreline and the impact that that might have on the rest of the lake as well.
We already have had that French term, session, that, it's like a bathtub, you're in a bathtub, those waves just propel, that sunk a boat. 2-3 years ago, so we're aware of that fact that if we don't have natural walls, and or if we have walls that don't allow impervious, we're starting to see more and more issues in terms of that. So cut to the chase, LMAC still needs to review this, but we want to develop a task force to build on the 1998 watershed plan specific to stormwater drains and septic systems. We've already initiated some discussions in both areas. We have to develop a rapid response plan. If we ever got invasive species or ever saw significant cyanobacteria bloom, are we ready with permits? Are we ready to know what we need to do? Are we ready to engage the town in terms of the Board of Selectmen and the public hearings, et cetera, so that we have, in essence, a checklist that we are good to go. We hope that never happens. There you have it.
So I have a question. So the most intensely phosphate laden lake bed areas, are those the deepest part of the lakes?
To date, correct.
So is there any, I've heard talk in the past that when the dam was rebuilt, the siphoning action at the lowest level went away because of probably a bad redesign of the dam. I don't know that to be the case, but that's what.
We can't prove that. We've discussed that with TRC. TRC actually, two things. TRC ran a model to say if we put a pipe and siphoned off the bottom of the lake from the dam instead of or with using the spillway, what would happen? And the analysis that came back was we would literally take of the 202 kilograms per year, 2 kilograms off, less than 1%, just about 1%. So if we put the dam back, maybe that'd be different because that's a much larger pipe and much larger width. But the second point I wanted to make relative to that is to date, and this is an estimate by TRC, we have to do the mapping to understand the depth of our lake, which we'll be discussing Wednesday on August 6th. That map to date, the estimate by TRC is anything 20 feet or more in the depth of Columbia Lake, which they estimate to be about 30 acres, is already anoxic. No oxygen. No oxygen, guess what's gonna happen to the phosphorus? It thrives on oxygen. It's gonna come up and we're gonna have resuspension and the sunlight and the heat it's gonna create that unfortunate toxic energy. So we're at that tipping point.
So what's been the net effect of the nutrient allocation process, analysis and with the implementation of nutrient allocation worksheets as a mandate for development in the lake watershed area? What's the net effect of that been?
I'm not sure I can answer that question directly. I can certainly take it to our TRC consultant. What he has said to us is 50% of, they believe, the phosphorus from all the measurements they're doing is coming from stormwater drain. Little is coming from groundwater, little is coming from the geese, but it's all additive. He may even be up to 60% now coming from stormwater. So it's hard for me to say, and I don't know if we have that analysis.
It would be helpful to know what that analysis is and to segment stormwater from low drains,
Yeah.
from overland water flow from properties.
Yep.
And in a general way, and then maybe segment it into different areas around what way. You know, if the only way we can plan is to have data and
Yep.
import actual factual data that can withstand the kind of challenge that we might pose to a professional presenter about where does this perspective come from?
And that data we're gathering, particularly specific to stormwater. I don't have that data relative to groundwater, which would be the nutrient allocation plan.
I mean, we all have the same goal. The key is we need, in order to implement anything that's beneficial, we need to understand the problem in a lot more depth, in a way that withstands the scrutiny of our questions, you know, and in your questions. More importantly, because a lot of the perspective that we've formed over the years has come from LMAC. Maybe not all of it.
There's another interesting example kind of that you brought up, Mary, which was talking about the dam, and then, you know, the possible solution of it, sure, eliminating 1% or 2%. So I think it would be interesting to know, we may know this already, but what's the cumulative effect of the phosphorus, like what percentage is it increasing each year? And then when we say, well, we've got this solution that would reduce it 2% each year.
Right.
Well, if it's increasing 4% each year, but we can do something to reduce it 2%, well, that's half, right? So I think that it probably goes back more to Rick's question or comment about data and being able to take those 5 or 6 or 10 or 100 pieces and saying what is the cumulative effect of that, so.
It was just about 10 years ago that we heard Bob Portman say the net effect of the nutrient allocation plan is that we're reducing phosphorus in the lake, if I recollect what he said to us. But it doesn't sound like that's accurate at this
Oh,
point.
no, it was reducing groundwater.
Okay,
That's what the nutrient allocation plan does, is reduces the groundwater portion of the
I
phosphorus.
knew we've
But
been.
the catch basins are something different.
Yes, but we've been at an inflection point for a long time. How different is this inflection point this year versus 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago? It would be really helpful to know what the net effect of the nutrient allocation analysis process has been. Because if we didn't have it, where would we be? I don't think it's safe to assume we'd be in a terrible place. We likely would be, but we don't have anything to base that perspective on. And I would hope well-paid experts could give us really accurate information.
Again,
I'm asking the question,
What's your budget?
when you do the seasonal project, and then you refill it again for the next year, does that usually cause a change in the concentration of phosphorus? The water that you're letting out versus the water coming back in?
Nothing significant, and I will bring that question to TRC, they've done the last 3 years of data. I'd have to go back and look at a former lake consultant to see, but nothing pops up as significant.
Sure.
But when we do the drawdown with the sinks rebuilt of the dam, They drawing up for the time.
Well, the mid. The middle. We're not drawing off the bottom end action. And that's unfortunate. But we can't prove that.
Yeah, so maybe back then when the pipe was there, it had more than it does.
So thank you.
We've heard a lot of speculation. We got a lot of good information come our way, but we probably need more.
Sure.
Yeah.
And, as long as we can ante up and have the budget to be able to do that, we'll go for it. We'll go for
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
I just hate to get to a point where, and for 10 years now, and Bob Powell brought this to my attention 10 years ago. We've had algae patches. And the one in 2015 was the largest one I've ever seen on this lake. I hate to get to a point where all of a sudden we have a bloom and, we're not ready. We're not ready. So we'll be back with a little more detail and thank you for the request that you made.
Thank you for all of the info. Really. Lot to absorb.
Is that it for the stakeholders?
What?
Is that it for the stakeholders or more?
Yeah, is that it, Johnny, for this evening?
Yeah, I believe so. Unless there's anyone else. And I also like that, I know Tom McGrath is there. I just wanted to thank him. He provided an outstanding, I think you guys all have a copy of it, an outstanding overview of some of the conservation groups that are working on this issue. I will say without embarrassment, we're going to lift a lot of that and just dump it right into the plan. It's outstanding background stuff.
Thank you.
I would like to talk just briefly about Marl Pond.
Oh, please do.
That,
This is the time.
so it's a huge topic and I didn't prepare anything. I was trying to take notes and I said, you know, we could be here for a couple of hours talking about it. But one of the things I was looking up was the current plan of conservation and development. The future land use map on page 112 really shows 10 years ago about the goal of protecting all that area up there. And I'm not a part of the open space committee, but I started attending as this started to happen. And getting the trust public land as a partner is just unbelievable what they were able to do to get the land. And then they were able to work with DEP. They usually walk away once they get the land. And they decided at a national level, they wanted to stay and help make this park happen. And they engaged through grants with the state DEP to get a group called Trail Solutions to come out and design a trail system. And Ann was able to get me an invitation after I begged. So I spent 5 days with them as we're walking out at the end of April, laying out trails. Why were they picking this and that, the other thing? And when they got done, they created a draft of almost 12 miles of trails. Most of them are gonna be, it's not fully vetted yet, but we're looking for another public engagement, September, October time frame. So it can really be digested and changed. But, so that's multi-use trails, mountain bike trails. How does it fit in with hunting and fishing and so forth? One of the things, oh yeah, history and conservation. What else do I have to say? No, that's what I said, it really is just a huge topic, that property drains the 3 different watersheds. So Giffords Brook is at the dam, that drains into 10-mile river. The southeast corner drains into Bartlett Brook and onto the Thames River. And one of the most important pieces, which the town had bought a chunk of land out there in Middlebrook Preserve. That's a tributary for the Salmon River, and that goes all the way to the Connecticut River. So all these different watersheds are involved with the state park planning. You were talking about invasives. Mono Pond itself, the original pond, had no invasives in it until they put the boat launch in. Now there's 3 invasives of concern, and our group, the Friends of Mono Pond, applied twice last year for deep grants to look at remediation, harvesting, We weren't picked, but we're still working through that, trying to get grants to get that maintained. One of the problems was the lake doesn't drain into Columbia Lake. If it did, they'd say, well, this is wonderful, we'll help you get rid of all these invasives. But because the invasives aren't really going into another important lake, and then they were talking about the whole thing, the life cycles, you know, someday there'll be a pasture and all this. So at this point, Deep doesn't seem to be that concerned about the actual original 200 acres, which was, the pond is about 100 acres, and then the land around it, which had originally gonna be the Island Woods development. When I look at a map, it's probably the easiest way to consider it, and I thought about this now, it's gonna sound stupid, but a snowman made out of 3 balls. The head part is the smallest area, which is the pond. The middle area is where we have Midfoot Preserve, and then the largest area is where the bottom, which is which would be the south end. And that abuts the airline trail. So one of the things we had was originally the park was just in Columbia, so there was an agreement with Deep and Conservation Commission to just maintain. With the acquisitions, it now extends into Lebanon. And the abutment, it'd be almost a mile shared boundary between the airline trail and Mile Pond State Park, between Leonard Bridge and Route 207. Because that's the largest area, the natural plan is potentially for the parking and access to the park to be coming in from Hebron and Lebanon. Well, we don't know yet how Lebanon and Hebron are really going to embrace that, expanding those parking lots. And if they don't, then the next thing, if you look at a flat map, the best place to come in is through Island Woods, Lake Ridge Drive, Wellswood. And those roads are not designed for that kind of traffic or having parking less of there. So that's one of the biggest concerns is how are we gonna get people in there? And how is it gonna be safe? And how are we gonna work with the other towns? The other big thing is the Airline State Park. Just this year, earlier this year, we were able to form an alliance of all 12 towns from Portland out to Putnam. And for the moment, I'm the vice president of that group because we really want to be engaged with the management plan for the airline trail in Ronald Pond to make sure it works. Once Trust of Public Land got engaged in this area, they became aware of Camp Laurel Girl Scout Camp, which is just over, it's about a mile and a half from the southeast corner of Ronald Pond. So that's 380 acres they're looking to preserve through the Apollonia Land Trust. And that's why this is really important regionally, because if that parts of that are open to the public, they're gonna have a connection to the airline trail, to Ronald Pond. So those 3 things working together, potentially in the next couple of years, will really make it an attraction for people to come here. A year or so ago, Hebron created an organization, Hebron Paths and Trails, and they've been trying to figure out greenway connections from the airline trail to downtown Hebron to draw people into the businesses. And I was able to work with them, show them potential trails so we could get them from the airline trail through Ronald Pond State Park up to there. So again, there's a lot of regional planning that has to take place, not just Columbia. So if you guys have any questions, or if you ever want to take a walk and see some of the land, reach out to me as a group or singly.
What do you need from us in terms of the P O C D? Some sort of connection to what you just summarized
I think,
as one of the goals of expanding that as we move forward as a community?
Yeah.
So
the trail connections, tourism,
most effective way is to come up with a statement that you'd request that we consider including, or the elements of including the P O C D would be really helpful. Again, this goes back to when you start to go to state and federal organizations for grants, having something in the P O C D is hugely helpful, actually essential in many of the grant programs.
so, but like I said, at the beginning was, a lot of this would never have happened if it wasn't for all the work that the Open Space Committee has done over the years to get this going. So.
I have one other comment, and it's not conservation, but it is land use. So I don't know when to say this, but cemeteries are not even whispered about in the POCD and code. And we have the town owned has accepted ownership of 2 of 4 cemeteries in this town. One is the little Root Family Cemetery in,
On Westwood Street.
yeah, and the old yard next to the Catholic Church. There are 2 active cemeteries. We are still selling lots and conducting burials. The other 2 are now, they're restored. No lots to sell, no more burials. But the 2 active cemeteries, in I run one of them, on the hill. That one has only 40 lots left to sell. We have many more burials, you know, the lots are sold, but they're not occupied. Yeah. The one across the street has only 20 left to sell. So the town needs to consider what are you gonna do about burial space? And and that would require purchasing land that's appropriate or accepting donations. It could be, so it is land use as well as history and culture. So, but cemetery is not mentioned at all in the current. So it's kind of hoping that we could start the conversation about cemeteries in this next one.
Thank you. Anything else on POCD? Anyone, anything, any questions from the commission? Okay. Nothing on regulation revisions, you send out an email.
Yeah,
That's probably going.
Yeah, I'll probably call a meeting later in August, early September, just to review if anybody has any.
There was a really interesting letter from Bruce Hopper about story polls.
That was cool.
Yeah, I was fascinated. I guess I'm looking for a better understanding of where we would.
It would, if I might, Mr. Chairman, I think the concept would be sort of incorporated into the development review process, if the commission had interest in that, wherein, you know, as part of the overall presentation by the applicant or developer, their site, you know, if you wanted to do a site visit or just a drive-by, would be prepared with essentially, you know, sort of a framework of massing. So that the town and commission would get a sense of where the structures would be, how tall they are, and that sort of thing. Back in the day when people still did subdivisions, I used to get big sort of weather balloons and hang them at about, you know, fill them with helium and hang them about 35 feet in the air so that people could see, you know, in a woods clearing or in a field, how tall the proposed, building or development would be. And it's that sort of concept. So, it's something that, certainly for a special permit situation, and if there was some sort of development in a visually sensitive area, something like this could be an interesting tool.
John, is there anyone in the state of Connecticut that requires that right now?
No, not that I'm aware of. I do know, like, there have been communities that do require, some indication of height at some point, but that's nothing, no one that I've encountered does this, as a rule all the time.
Okay.
But it's an interesting concept.
The one thing I would observe about this, it would be interesting to be able to look at certain areas, but we really don't have any design guidelines within town.
Right.
So,
and I mean, I would say, your because of our digital renderings, 3D mapping and sort of computer aided design, like 3D renderings and fly-throughs have gotten increasingly easy to do. And drone flights and things like that are very cheap. So, there are other tools available to sort of understand visually what a development's impact on the landscape would look like. So it's not just this.
interesting. Let's revisit this concept. I just want to absorb it.
Yeah.
Pretty foreign idea to me at this point, but I always stay open.
And
I think about in the lake watershed area, what having story poles would do. I know when we've had cell towers proposed, we've had the cellular companies float balloons to give us an idea. And quite frankly, it's never helped.
It's not that helpful now.
No, yeah. Never helped. But it's really interesting. Might be more interesting for this if there were large scale mixed use development in the center of town. To get a perspective on what the visual impact on structures closest to the road would have on the visual impact on flow through traffic. But I'm just trying to keep my mind open. Thank you. My thanks to Mr. Hopper.
Mr. Chair, may I make one quick note on the POCD?
Yes.
So yeah, again, just to reiterate the plan for next time, which is again the second Thursday or second Monday, second meeting of August, which would be the fourth Monday. We will have again a draft conservation and natural resources chapter. And the next set of discussions will be on community, cultural, and historic resources, which combines a few things. I will be inviting Parks and Recreation. I'll be inviting the town manager in terms of community resources, the Historical Society. Tom, I think we would probably like a little bit of a report on the airline trail. I don't know if Tom is still there, Tom McGrath. About the airline trail and trails. I do think, to Anne's point, cemeteries, this would be a good place for a cemetery discussion. And there actually is a mention of cemeteries and the importance of documenting the sort of the contents and history of cemeteries in the current plan. It doesn't go into a lot of detail. And then I would also suggest, based on our discussion this evening, that we probably would move a significant chunk, if not all, of the discussion about the Zegda farm over to the community resources chapter. I think that actually might be a better spot for it, because I think it's probably best defined as a multi-purpose community facility than it is sort of a true natural resource element. So that's unless if there are other entities or stakeholders we should consider inviting. Again, it's cultural resources, historic resources, community resources. We'll send out invitations to those folks.
No, that makes any thoughts? Yep, that's agreed.
Yeah, I think this was, as far as I'm concerned, this was extremely productive tonight.
Yeah. Lot of info tonight, and we really appreciate it, everybody who came. Anything, there was also a newsletter that you circulated, a copy of, and anything under commission open discussion, anything anyone wants to bring up? Audience of citizens, anything that we didn't have on the agenda? Okay. No executive session, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor?
Night.
That's unanimous. Thank you.